Good evening everyone. It's my privilege to meet with you here today on land where people have gathered to share art, culture and knowledge for more than 70,000 years. And I pay my respects to the strength and vibrancy of the continuing living cultures of Australia's First Nations. My name's Adrian Collette. I'm CEO of the Australia Council, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight introducing the Vivid Ideas event. And it's wonderful to be back. It's taken a long time. Artists and creatives help us understand what it is to be human. They connect us to our past as they imagine our future. Their restless ideas invite us to reimagine ourselves, to challenge ourselves and what we see around us. Tonight, we will explore how artists can help address the many challenges that have been exposed through the pandemic. You've likely heard of that disquieting metaphor, the COVID X-ray. COVID, with stealthy precision, found out all systemic weak spots, whether as individuals or communities. X-rays are not for the faint-hearted. They express and expose what ails us with disarming accuracy, but they also direct us to what we must attend to what we need to fix to restore good health. This visionary session will explore the changing conditions for arts and creativity, new social and community roles for the arts, and recent innovations, of course, in digital engagement. What the arts did next will showcase the contributions that artists are making to social cohesion, innovation, and health. At the Australia Council, we are thinking a lot about the future of culture and creativity, how art will be made, distributed, experienced, and what decisions need to be made now to positively influence the future, recognising our responsibility to all those who follow us. And I have to say, in this context, it is so encouraging to hear Minister Burke in his first days announce his commitment to the development of a national cultural plan. It's also hugely encouraging, I have to say, to hear the Prime Minister in his acceptance speech front and centre pay respect to the Uluru Statement from the heart and to announce it as such a central policy development initiative for the new government. The future we want to make at the Australia Council is one where arts, culture and creativity are recognised because they make meaning, certainly, and also because they are a profound public good. We invest because creativity and culture make better lives. They make our individual lives better and our communities better. And tonight across Sydney, we know that we're surrounded by such creativity. So what did the arts do next? It's time to find out. Astrid Edwards will facilitate tonight's panel with 4 other exciting artists and thinkers. Astrid is a bibliophile. She's the host of the Garrett Writers on Writing, and you can read her book reviews in The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, and in many other forms of book reviews. In 2021, Astrid contributed to the anthology Growing Up Disabled in Australia. She's the former chair of Melbourne Writers' Festival and the former deputy chair of Writers Victoria. Astrid is also a member of the Victorian Disability Advisory Council, advising the Minister for Disability, Ageing and Carers. So Astrid, what did the arts do next?
That is a good question. Hello everybody and thank you for being here. Before we dive in, I would like to introduce the 4 panellists tonight. Cam Naxon, on the far end of the stage from me, is a singer, a songwriter and a producer. Not only does he write and perform his own work, he also writes for some of the biggest upcoming acts in Australia, the US and the UK. Relevant to our discussion tonight, Cam is the person behind quite a successful Change.org campaign to save the Australian music industry earlier this year. And you should all look forward to it. At the end of this session, Cam is going to perform one song for us. Yeah, absolutely. Right next to me is Scotia Monkovich. Now, Scotia is the Executive Officer of Creative Recovery Network, which advocates for the role of culture and the arts in disaster management and builds a network of artists ready to support communities in meeting future challenges, particularly climate change. Scotia is also an artist herself and has a performance background in movement-based theatre. Next to Cam, we have Jazz. Jazz Money is a Wiradjuri poet, artist, and filmmaker. Her debut poetry collection, How to Make a Basket, was published in 2021, and the work actually won the David Unayapon Award in manuscript form in 2020. Jazz's work crosses mediums, and although she is devoted to the written word, her poetry is often reimagined as murals, visual art, and video art. And finally, Safdar Ahmed is an artist, writer, and educator. His graphic novel, Still Alive, Notes from Australia's Immigration Detention System, won the 2022 Book of the Year Award in the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards. Congratulations.
Woo, woo, woo.
And that work, Still Alive, was actually based on his previous Walkley Award-winning webcomic, Villawood. Now, both works grew from Safdar's ongoing involvement with the Refugee Art Project, which is a non-profit community arts organisation that he co-founded, supporting asylum seekers and refugees through art workshops. So welcome to the panel. Really quick housekeeping. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes. Cam is going to perform, and then we will, and before he performs, we will have questions from the audience. There will be roving mics, so if you have a question, there will be an opportunity. So let's get going. A question for all of you, and please, different perspectives and disagreements are most welcome on this panel. From your point of view, how are the arts, and perhaps most importantly, the artists themselves, doing right now? Cam, you are furthest from me, so I'm going to start with you.
Oh dear. Hi everyone. Yeah, how we're doing right now, I think, is optimistic, but mindful. We've all been burnt pretty bad multiple times, and that we're not alone in any of our industries and any of the sectors of the arts either. So I think we're just at the point where we really, really want change and to get our message, and not only our messages, but I guess get the understanding of our lifestyles across, and the importance of why society does really need to appreciate and understand artists a little bit deeper.
Before we move on, can you just briefly introduce everyone to the campaign that you launched? Like, what was the specific ask, the specific goal?
Yeah, I guess again, as artists, we can be very emotional about the way that we put everything across. So I kind of just did an Instagram post. I didn't really think much of it, and put my feelings about being an independent artist and a person that works with a lot of up-and-coming artists, and trying to help people who are not in the industry understand what it's like to be a part of the gig community. You work. Let's say your employer says to you, hey, yeah, so we're going to pay you monthly, and you have to come to work every single day of that month, but if you're not there for the last minute of the last day of the month, you don't get paid at all, even though you've spent all this money on rehearsals, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. You don't get paid until the end of it all. So yeah, it's mainly just getting that across.
Artists deserve to get paid. Jazz.
Yeah.
How are artists doing now? Such an unglamorous answer that I'm going to give, which is tired. Everyone I know is so tired. And I think it comes from what you're saying, Cam, like artists and everyone, but artists, I think in particular, because of the nature of our work and being driven into this mad, industry of expression, so much is happening on the surface, and so much is happening on really deep levels, and so there's all this processing and manifesting what's happening into work, and that takes a really long time. And after the last few years of just the most intense drain on everyone's creativity, we've suddenly been thrown back into forward public-facing work, and that's really, really, it's so wonderful, but I don't think anyone's had any time to heal or recoup, and now it's this non-stop, it's just non-stop. And so everyone I know is kind of walking around a bit dazed, wondering if there's going to be any respite or calm.
That would be nice. Safdar, your opening thoughts?
Yeah, just to say that I guess it's no secret the arts have been depleted over the last 9 years, and with COVID on top of that, and the damage that's been done to people economically who rely on the gig economy, I think now more than ever we need a revival of arts funding. Also to make it more equitable in terms of who can make art, because at the moment, if you're very well off and you can make artwork in your mum's garage, you're lucky. But there are many people who haven't been able to create or do anything in the absence of funding that makes things a bit more equitable.
Absolutely. Scotia?
Maybe I'll take a different lens and talk about creatives being everyone, and I think that's the agenda that I have, that we all are active citizens. And like everyone has said, everyone is carrying very thin skin at the moment, so there's that tension between being tired or being very angry, and I think that's sort of a holding pattern for our society at the moment. But I also think there's a lot of hope, because we have been given an opportunity, as well as a challenge, an opportunity through COVID and the other things that are occurring at a societal level, to really see our role as leaders, and leaders in this, as Adrian said, the framing of what it means to be human and how we do that with dignity and care. And I think it's also a time for a wake-up. We're waking up a little to the power of what we carry in our toolkits as creatives.
Thank you all. They're your opening statements, but as we, go through this talk, please talk over each other and, talk to each other. It's way more interesting for the audience. So, you've expressed kind of each of you where you think the arts and artists are now, but I'd like to kind of ask you a deliberately provocative question, and that is, who is looking after the artist? Who has looked after the artists? And where can artists look now? Anyone want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll get a kick in. I think that predominantly it's been the artist, and there's no shortage of money in the arts in general. There's a lot of money to be made, but in terms of the artist, we've discussed it. There's very little trickle down to the point of the people who are actually making that art, and I love what you said, like the power that we hold, like that's something that I think we need to really understand, like, and help each other a bit more to understand, like, how much power we hold as the artists, not big, massive corporations that go and sell our art. It's about us. We are the power of the arts. Yeah.
So that is a beautiful statement, but my role is to make you be more specific here. How can the artists help each other? I mean,
I think
more than emotional.
Yeah. I think there's always equal challenge, isn't it? Because I think there's probably within the arts sector very little reciprocity, and we need to build that. And we do actually need to functionally work more effectively in taking care of each other. And there's a difference between taking care of each other and looking at structural change. And I think that's where we can do a lot more work. And that's about how do we form collective voice for the gaps of support that we need. And I don't necessarily think that's about money either. I think that's about recognition, support, and structures put into place to ensure that we have things like appropriate contracts, et cetera, which has always been a bugbear. But, and I think that it's interesting, there's a big conversation around well-being and mental health within the arts for some years now. And a lot of the pressure is put back on the individual to be responding to that without looking at the structural change to ensure that if we are looking after ourselves, our sector is also backing that up in terms of structural reforms, in terms of good workplace, et cetera. And I think we can learn a lot from outside of the arts to how we can functionally have a collective voice around pushing for change in that sports industry does it really well, the health industry does it really well. Like, why have we missed the boat? And it's about kind of also taking due responsibility as an individual to ensure that we're putting our voice into this collective vision for good work, good workplace.
Jazz and Safta, you're both writers of different forms. What do you think of that? You just said the responsibility of the individual. Any thoughts there?
In partnership with the structures.
Yeah, I think I think community matters a lot. Certainly, in my experience with my circle of creative friends, people do help each other. If someone ends up needing to raise money for a medical procedure, a GoFundMe campaign is created, and often when I look at the people donating to that, they're other artists who are poor and starving as well.
Yeah.
And so I really admire that, that sense of community. I think when it comes to understanding why the arts have been under attack, a big part of that is just that it's been so politicised over the last 9 years. And it isn't just the arts that have been under attack, it's higher education, and it's the study and research of the humanities. And I think, art helps us understand the world. Art creates meaning and gives our lives meaning, but it also serves a very important critical function, and I think that's what has been eroded through the sort of relentless, attack and defunding of the arts. Perfect example is in academia. In 2018, the Minister for Higher Education was given ARC research grants, which it's his role to simply approve, and he slashed 11 grants because he didn't like the titles because they had words like, post-colonial in them, and feminist. And so if we can depoliticise the whole question of arts funding and the role of arts institutions, that's one step in the right direction.
Yeah, but you can't depoliticise art. Art is political.
Oh, of course, definitely. But you shouldn't attack artists for saying the thing you disagree with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jazz, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to pick up and just say that I think also the people supporting artists are all the people who consume art. And I think that's everyone. And even though it's not necessarily the way that we get paid so much of the time, I think the reason that we're able to do what we do is because there is an audience who wants to engage with the work that we put out, and that is the community of artists amongst itself, but we're not rich enough to hold it all up. And so anyone who's listening to music or reading books or watching TV or films, we're all participants in a broad arts community. And I think in that way, everyone is an artist, or contributing to the arts sector. We just need to figure out a way that no one has to be the starving artist donating to a GoFundMe campaign for someone to have some surgery that they should be covered for anyway.
Do you think like it might help being able to kind of make the broader community and like as in the broader Australia aware of like how they are actually supporting artists? Like, do you think maybe they're just not quite as aware of like, oh wow, like yeah, going and buying the book or downloading the song, like is
Yeah,
that...
you don't have to go to the Archibald to like have
Exactly.
an appreciation
Yeah,
of the arts.
exactly.
Well, I think it's really like picking up on what you were saying, Scotia, the way that sports kind of brands itself as being this thing for the people and this very public commodity. And when you look at the sort of money that sports, say, brings in and the sort of money that the arts brings in, it's the arts wins. Like the arts is a more profitable sector. And
There's more children that go to ballet schools and music classes than there are that go to sport.
Yeah, and more people go to galleries and museums every year than go to sports games. And there are these things where it's just like, why can't we sell that better? And it's what you're saying as well, Safta, is like, well, there's a threat, right? It's like the arts is perceived as a threat to the dominant Western colonial patriarchal capitalist society. And so the fear of celebrating and pushing it seems like sport is safer, perhaps.
So when we talk about, the arts is a storytelling community, regardless of what medium you all choose to tell those stories. I have an anecdote to share with you. I watched the news with my parents last night, and the last 7 minutes of the half-an-hour news was about sport. It wasn't about the arts. And I often wonder, how did that happen? So a question for you all. the word critique, the word politics, the word funding, and the word structure has been said at some point in the last 15 minutes. What are the responsibilities of the arts sector? So not the individuals, but the sector. And what are the barriers preventing the sector looking after itself? Who wants to take that big one first?
Yeah, maybe it's the connection you referred to. The fact that during lockdown, everyone turned to Foxtel and Netflix and enjoyed high quality series and dramas. But then you need to make a connection between, watching Kate Blanchett on some big production and understanding that she went to the local theatre community hall, that often gets ignored. And it's those community spaces where we nurture creative practice, particularly in young people, which, often get completely ignored and really struggle for crumbs when it comes to sustaining themselves. So I think it's maybe just making that connection that it's all of the arts. It's not just the thing that people turn to, their favourite band or whatever.
It's something about how we've framed a story of privilege, I think, is that often the arts is seen within a kind of privileged context, certainly publicly, and that's probably why it's not on the news. And so there's a kind of dissonance in terms of what we're seeing and how we're telling that narrative, and that narrative doesn't match. So, in terms of what the arts did next, is about, well, how do we step out of a story of privilege in terms of framing ourselves within deep community relevance and necessity? Like if we want people to see the value, which we believe that art and cultural and engagement is vital for our daily lives, we have to shift that privilege narrative.
I think also, a lot of my best mates are not musicians, and I think from an outsider's perspective, looking in at the arts, I think that we can often be seen as, maybe a little too cool, or a little bit too, it's kind of daunting, for people to deal with us, and potentially that, I think, is a lot, because we are pretty extra.
Maybe in the musician field, it's not like that in writing.
Oh, really? You guys are just hanging out? Just...
No, everyone scuttles off when the light goes on.
Yeah. Oh, that's the same. That's the same. Well, now that I'm old. Yeah. But yeah, I think that headspace has not been helped by potentially more commercial medias trying a little bit to put that spin on us as artists and all that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately, in terms of the sector as a whole, realistically, we're just too many individuals kind of trying our best to help our own self and the people around us, because that's what we have access to. And there's that question of I guess we were talking about it, and it's a bit of a dirty word, but unionizing in some way, shape or form, where we can have a voice and a guide to put the messages that we really want to get across in ways that will work.
So you've just used a really big word, unionizing. That is one solution, a huge solution, and I don't even have the questions to begin to unpick how that happens. But, that's one answer to the income difficulties that so many people, so many artists in the gig economy experience. What are the other answers that you've all found yourself thinking when you're stuck in lockdown, or when you are critiquing the world around you through your art?
I think that there is something that I have picked up. I think there's such an unfortunate cultural cringe in Australia, right? And I think that comes across in every tier. But we don't back our own creations, and I think that's such a big part of it. And I think that comes a lot down to our media organisations for try and watch some Australian short films on broadcast TV. Like you won't find them. And we make amazing short films. And I mean, I understand that we are part of a global community, and that is an important thing to be in dialogue. But I mean, nearly always the major film on the first night of a film festival in Australia is an international film, and the headline acts at the writers' events are international. And at the ARIAs we have international performers performing, and it starts saying this thing, which is like we're so insecure, we so can't back the things that we're doing. And I think that trickles down into every engagement, right? Because then you stop looking to Australia because you're being told that we're not creating world-class things. And you just go to America or the UK or wherever it is that is easy, and they're pushing and they're confident in the way they're pushing it, and it's fucking trash half the time.
Yeah.
But that's what's consumable, and I think that's a really big issue from like a very top tier like cultural conditioning.
Yeah, the issue of consumability is one that I sort of dwell on when it comes to this issue. We're being provocative tonight, right? So I think
Please do.
I'll say something a little bit critical about contemporary art. A problem, I think, maybe in the contemporary art world is that it is so market-driven, and it is such a neoliberal space that often to create maximum impact and to get maximum numbers of people and to try and appeal to a wider range of the public, you get work which isn't as good. And I don't know if that actually helps that world in the longer run. I mean, a blatant example of that is in many big exhibitions, there's the so-called Instagram work where, you know, you get a big artist to do something really big, and it's always experiential, and it's the sort of thing which encourages people to take selfies for Instagram in front of. And that's part of the marketing, and that's part of the planning to prove that the exhibition has been a success. So it's
Don't
not
forget to hashtag us.
exactly. So that's when I think the quality perhaps suffers, and the connection to local communities is a bit lost when you're sort of hostage to the market. And that is also the consequence of economic precarity. There are many big contemporary art institutions and private galleries who have to do that. You know, otherwise maybe they won't get the numbers they need, or the numbers that they need to justify further funding and so on. So maybe that can be a problem sometimes. Yeah.
Anything to add or a different perspective, Scotia?
I'm a bit lost, actually.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the provocation is that we are too insular and we have to see ourselves in the context of a very complex world. And if we keep coming back to the we, the sector, we kind of lose our place. And now more than ever, if we're talking about what the arts do next, is we have to be immersing and enmeshing ourselves in our communities and our context, political, social, spiritual frame of reference. So
I'm going to bring a word into the conversation: value. How do we value ourselves? And I don't mean number of likes on Instagram. I mean that narrative that is told to the broader community. How do we sell that story?
I mean, again, I think that as artists, it kind of has to start from ourselves. Like, I was having a discussion with someone the other night about how when I asked him like how busy is he, and he's like, oh man, I'm so busy and blah blah blah. Just like, oh dude, like, and we kind of both stopped and was like, wait, isn't that like a really good thing? And I think it's because we've started off as hobbyists who love doing what they do, and then we became professionals at that because we loved it enough to get really, really good at it, and now we've made careers out of it. But that fear of like the external looking at us like we're still hobbyists and having to prove to those people like how busy we are, and like, oh man, I do so much work and all this kind of stuff, is it like, so I think it starts there with understanding the value of everything that we do, and then I think you can just, it comes out of us. Like, we're so good at expressing ourselves that when we actually truly believe in our own value, ends up, yes, coming out to the public. I'm good at words.
I love your confidence. Jazz and Safdar, you both write, and writing and creating in that way is such a solitary activity. You know, you might sit at your desk for days or months or years creating a work by yourself. When you think of your work going out into the world and you are both successful, I guess I'm going to flip the value question. What barriers have you faced to your value going widely? And I mean that in terms of book sales, I mean that in terms of the remuneration and recognition for that artistic labour.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on how to respond to that. One being that I am kind of skeptical of hype, and that you need to make your value with likes or reviews or consumption en masse, even though, like, obviously that's deadly, but I write poetry, so like I gotta take the wins where I can get them, and I'm not expecting to have, you know, a bestseller in the millions. I think to me the value comes from the intimate and the personal, and to have someone come to a talk, and or if I do a reading and if someone's crying, I don't think that's going to happen tonight. That's like the thing that makes my work meaningful, or to change someone's mind is one of the great gifts of making art, right? If you can have a connection with someone, particularly, it's such an incredible gift, right? Where you can have, my book has sold to people that I will never meet, and we get to have this really intimate connection with one another, and I don't even know who they are, and if I'm like getting them through a moment or something, and every now and then I'll get like a message from someone who'll say, like, this piece really meant something to me, and I'll think, oh, I almost pulled that poem out of the book. I'm so glad I left it in, because these are the things that make it meaningful. And I think for me, like, I work in a bunch of different mediums, but that's the thing that draws me to having any sort of output is to have the intimate.
Yeah, I'd echo that, I think, because when you make something, it's a fundamentally communicative act, and you're doing it to try and convey all these feelings to another person. And for me, the strongest validation came from sharpening my steel, I guess, in the zine world, which is for me a very utopian space, because people make zines not for any kind of profit or any kind of quote-unquote career, but to just self-publish things that they're really passionate about. And that was when I started actually, you know, putting things out there and getting support from that scene. And then everything to come after that, I think, came from that platform.
I think also, Astrid, just to pick up on the question again, and kind of, Safdar, because of what you were saying, like, the zine community is really, really supportive, right? I wouldn't say I'm a member, but like, that's the thing that I think, you know, you said it's solitary writing, and it is, but actually the writing community, the one that I've been exposed to, is so vibrant and supportive, and that is, I never anticipated that when I kind of started writing. I thought that writing was a solitary thing that you like struggled and threw yourself at the desk, but it's actually being a member of a community that just want to see each other shine. It's not competitive and it's not cut down, or at least not any exposure I've had to it, and I think that's part of the value as well, right, is watching other people shine.
It goes back to one of the comments at the beginning, that it's the artists who are looking after the artists, like the community is strong. The communities within the art sector are quite strong. The topic here tonight is what the arts did next. And I kind of want to tie each of you to a specific answer on this one, and I do apologise. I know you don't like giving specific answers. But when you think about the community you are a member of within the whole arts community, what is something that you want to see happen, whether it benefits the individual, whether it benefits you, whether it's a giant structural change, but like one thing that you want to see happen? We haven't heard from you for a while, Scotia.
It's very hard to drill down to one. I'm very greedy.
You could have more than one.
Well, in the context of where I'm working at the moment, it's really about whole of societal change, so to give opportunity for a deepening of conversation around our human role in a climate context. And one key thing for me is to have culture and the arts as a framing narrative in that. So that's in policy, it's in strategy, it's in funding, and it's in activation. So one key thing is for that. In terms of the arts sector and the artists we work with, one key thing I'd like to see is that structural change around care, so that we can look at modalities that are about working well, so having good benchmarks of practice, having ethical frameworks around how we engage with ourselves but also with the community, and having some real investigation into better workplace practice. And that means we have to understand the value proposition we offer and to sell that better.
Safta?
Is this the final question where we sort
No,
of
it's
throw
not
out
the final.
Oh, it's not. Okay. I wasn't
Keep
sure
a
if
few
I should
aces up your
put
sleeve.
all my points in this
You got-
answer.
You got something up your sleeve. Really good.
Okay, one thing I want to see change, it's probably to decolonize the art world and art industries. It's one thing to, pay people of colour and diverse artists from diverse backgrounds to be part of festivals or group exhibitions or whatever the event might be. But I think true diversity and that process of decolonisation has to happen also in the upper spheres of management and curatorship and all of those things. And I think that might be a painful process for some institutions and some organisations, but it needs to happen. Be a leader on that, or you eventually be dragged to that. So that's one polemical thing I thought should say.
Well said. Jazz?
I didn't know what I was going to say when it came to me, because I was worried that some of the points that I had might already be expired by the time. But actually, kind of just thinking about the things that you two have both said, because I work cross-disciplinarily, I feel like I'm never fully all in one room, but get to kind of see a bit from the outside. And I often think about, this isn't a strictly one answer, but bear with me. I often think about Next Wave Festival down in Melbourne. I remember talking to a friend once who was, close to the organisation. They said that they have 3 questions that they ask artists when they start developing a work. So the artist will pitch the work, and the festival, I don't know if they're still doing this, I hope they do, because it's great. They'd say, how is this a sustainable project? And if not, why not? Like, you have to justify the use of the materials here because we're a low impact and we're committed to that holistically. They'd say, how is this sovereign, and acknowledging First Nations sovereignty? And if not, why not? Justify yourself. And finally, how is it accessible to everyone? And if not, why not? And how are you going to remedy that so that, yes, this is an audio piece, but you need to have other ways of addressing that? And I think that is something that I try to check in with constantly in the sort of work that I'm putting out.
They are 3 great questions, and you said that came from Broadwave in Melbourne?
Next Wave.
Next Wave, yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So-
Cam, perspective from the music industry.
Yeah, I think mostly what I'd love to see happening more is, I think we need to delve into the conversation and changing the narrative within the music industry and changing it towards independence and away from bigger organizations and the idea that that's success, because in my experience, the most successful people that I know are doing it independently, and they are making a living from doing it because no one's taking money from them that they don't realistically deserve. And then it comes all the way down to like the boring stuff, which to me is contracts and the issue that has been raised recently around insurance schemes within the music industry, like I touched on with before. Like, who is it that's meant to pay us when the gig doesn't go ahead? And we're so quick to jump forward and raise our hands when anyone needs anything, to the point where we don't think about those kinds of things, where like we're like, oh man, this massive festival is going on. I really want to be a part of it. Yeah, whatever the contract says, yeah, sick, awesome, let's do it. And then the festival gets cancelled and the booking agents still get paid, and the people who supplied all the beer get paid, and the people right down here at the bottom who
The headline acts who are
the
getting in all the
headline
people.
acts, the people that people are coming to see don't get paid. And I think that's the next step moving forward.
I would add writers' festivals to festivals that need insurance and that kind of backing as well. Now, I do have a final question for you all. But before I ask the final question, I want to remind you all that please, you have an opportunity to ask questions for the panel. There will be a roving mic. You can direct a question to the panel or you can direct a question to individuals. That will be coming momentarily. But a moment to reflect, and I'd like you to all give the audience something that you really want them to take away. You're all members of the arts community, obviously, but you are all also engaged in advocacy for issues and for communities that aren't part of the arts, but are still central to you and to the world around us. For example, the climate and the climate crisis. As leaders in the arts sector, what do you want everybody here to take away? They're going to remember four things, and it's what you say next. I'm in the arts, I can't count. Who wants to go first?
Can I say two things?
You can say as many things as you want.
Greedy. One
And
thing.
don't hold back.
Sorry, okay, sure. One thing just relates to what Jazz just said about accessibility. Obviously, during COVID, the arts took a huge hit, and everyone really struggled. But one small silver lining was the fact that galleries were putting their shows online. There were virtual exhibitions. More things were being shared through Zoom and YouTube and what have you. And that actually was a very good thing for people who have accessibility issues. Remember, 20% of Australia's community have a disability of some form or another. So I feel like accessibility and inclusion isn't something we should forget. We've been so ableist through the whole COVID pandemic. I get it, everyone's exhausted. We all want to go back to normal. But at the same time, don't forget those communities. Keep your virtual online exhibitions, keep your Zoom panels, etc. Because I'm really dismayed to see galleries giving that up because they think they're going back to normal, whereas it was actually a very good thing for those communities. That's one thing. Secondly, second thing just refers back to what I said about decolonisation. Yes, we're all part of a sort of broad community of creative people. We all rely on each other and we're all networked, but there's also community in opposition. And so I would point particularly to the recent boycott of the Sydney Festival over the question of accepting funding from the Israeli embassy. And in protest, you had a whole range of artists boycotting that festival in solidarity with Palestinians and the ongoing occupation and dispossession of Palestinians by Israel and the apartheid that they experience. I think that's very important. I think we need to know that our art institutions and our art festivals are getting their money from ethical sources, not some sort of art washing for states or organisations that do dubious things. And as a creative person, I don't want to receive money and patronage through those channels. So we're connected in that way as well. And that boycott was a very powerful example of how BDS can be enacted by creative people to make a moral statement. And don't forget the power of your work, but the power of those statements as well.
Woo!
Awesome.
Yeah, that deserves a clap.
Oh, thank you.
Jazz.
It's an act
Good
to
luck.
follow. I think the thing you referred to us all as leaders, and that's very kind. And the first thought I had was like, I'm not a leader. You should listen to my elders. And I think that's actually the thing I want to lead with is like, or leave with is there is so much knowledge that is held in the sovereign peoples of this continent, and so many stories that should be celebrated and held up and our elders are the keepers of that knowledge. And I think I don't feel comfortable in any way being seen as a leader because I'm just a baby when it comes to learning in this space. And I say that as a First Nations person. I also say it as a queer person. I think we have this really big issue in the queer community of forgetting our elders because queerness so often centres on being hot and young and being at a party because that's why it's branded by all these rainbow wash corporations. And I think that's really bad and destructive. And so, yeah, my soapbox moment is just to say, listen to your elders and seek them out, and their stories are so incredibly valuable. First Nations people hold that knowledge, but all of our elders do. They've gone through so much more than so many of us, and yeah, that's my thing about the arts.
Thank you. Scotia.
Well, I think what would be great to leave this room with is a sense of vulnerability. I think it's being vulnerable that we enable a conversation to occur in a space that enables change. So in order for us to be change makers, we have to be vulnerable and know that we don't have all the answers, similarly to what you're saying. And again, it's about stepping into relationship, because again, we won't have future if we don't have relationship. And there's an exhibition down in the foyer here that frames that so very beautifully in the health context, that care is relationship and relationship is key for our future. And again, we offer the world a capacity to be in relationship through creativity. So what a gorgeous gift to give, to remind ourselves, as was mentioned at the very beginning, that to be human is to be creative. So vulnerability and relationship.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
No pressure.
Yeah. I think, honestly, I think what I'd love to leave with is kind of, it's definitely been a bit of a self-reflection for myself and how I've tried to communicate with people in the past compared to how I communicate with people now. And it's probably through a lot of trial and error and seeing what is working and what people are responding to and what they aren't. And the reality is that we are ourselves, and we are then part of a bigger community and then a bigger community. And the reality is that our differences are really beautiful. And even though there are ugly parts of all of it, we need to change the way that we converse. And that is exactly like what we were discussing before, is it's not a conversation when you're yelling at each other. And it's not a way to get your point across to belittle the people that don't have the same opinion as you. And I think why particular things get traction is because the people know how to converse with each other and share ideas and share experiences. It's so unique, the experience we have as artists. How can we expect everyone to understand that? So let's just try and moving forward and being understanding of each other and trying to have respectful conversations.
Respectful conversations. Thank you all. Can we have questions from the audience? We have one down the front here, and also then over
I was watching it.
here first, and then over there.
Hi, I'm actually a student art teacher in training and literally came from my professional one placement early today to come and watch you guys here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Happy to be here. It's very
Well, how great to have someone in the education department advocating for the arts. Thank you.
my question to you all is, what would you like art teachers and people who work with youth and children, how would you like us to guide the future generations towards what we do next? So what advice could you give to, let's say, a profession like me, or who wants to advocate for the creatives in high schools, in the system? What advice and what direction would you recommend?
I would recommend that you instill curiosity. Without curiosity, we don't have any capacity to make change. So how do we give young people the self-determined capacity to be curious? What are the tools we need to give them? That's your task, is give them tools to be able to be curious and to challenge.
Love that.
That's such a good question. I've done a few, like too many panels recently, and it's so nice to hear a question like that. I think I have so many answers that I want to give, and they're obvious in a lot of ways about like First Nations sovereignty. But I think, kind of picking up on what Scotia was saying, I was really instilled with fear when I was at school, like that you have to have this aim or this goal, and it has to make money. And that was a really big weight, and I'm sure so many people in the room can feel that. And then I got out into the world, not that I don't think school is, and I get to work in these ways that are so exciting to me that I never could have imagined. And it happened because I was from a family that really supported me getting an education, even though that wasn't necessarily things that, the level of education I got was absolutely not afforded to anyone else in my family. And so I think like curiosity is such a good point to take that from, and to not be afraid of where that might take you. I think as we go forward, we're going to need young creative folk more and more, and it thrills me to imagine where that's going to go. Oh, and to study Indigenous futurisms. That's my other thing.
Yep, I'd echo all of that, and also say, I mean, I've done a bunch of workshops, particularly in Western Sydney schools, and what really strikes me is they're not the most well-funded schools. Teachers do need to get paid a lot more, of course, but I'm always struck by A, how sweet the kids are, but B, also how important art classes are and creative practice is for their self-esteem and their sense of self at a really crucial and often very fragile time for them. So I think, and I've seen that with kids of a refugee background and, all the sort of diverse backgrounds that you find out in Western Sydney. So, yeah, I think it needs to be emphasised how important it is for kids' sense of self to be doing art that they love, that expresses who they are. So that's very...
Yeah.
And respite. It's a place for respite.
Definitely. Just tacking on the end there, it's absolutely about the curiosity. I love that answer. It's so much about, like letting people find their passion for whatever it is, and whether it's art or whether it's through art they find something else. Doesn't matter. I guess I am lucky enough to have grown up like in a relatively privileged way, and I think that the curiosity in those areas need to be also leading to thinking about the experience of others more than just your own personal experience and your own curiosity and passions. It needs to be also think about it from the other side of anything that you think, feel, believe in. Challenge yourself to think about that.
Question over there. Oh, hi, thanks for the conversation. It's so exciting to be in the room. I would class myself as an art enthusiast, supporter, member of the creative community. So thank you for this opportunity. My big question to you all is, what inspires you to keep going?
Thank you. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm happy to start. I see all the work that I do as an extension of activism and as a way of telling stories in the different modes that seem like they're going to make impact. And so the thing that inspires me is the communities that support me, that I feel that I have a responsibility towards, and a responsibility to advocate and be an active participant of, not to ever speak on behalf of people, but to ensure that there are complex narratives being entered into the conversation. And that is why I work across different mediums, because I think there's always space for a bit of complexity.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say I think I'm very pessimistic about the future. I think in the next decade or two we're going to be witnessing massive system failure and food and water shortages and all sorts of climate change-induced chaos, unless we change something, and I think the arts are central to that. If you think of all the great movements for social justice and reform, and you think of all the worst periods in human history, we remember the art from those times. We remember, we understand those through the lens of that sort of creative work. And I think of World War II, I think of, George Gross and Oskar Kokoschka and all those people. So, and Kath Kollowitz and you name it. So I think we need to go down fighting, because our world might be doomed anyway, and you need art, frankly.
What's the worst that could happen?
And life is short, so create.
Love that.
I feel like Scotia needs to talk after you, because she is more hopeful than you are, Safta. Scotia, you're up.
Great dinner party guest.
I think you fake it till you make it, don't you? I think what inspires me is, it is my activism, in the sense that we do need to connect as humans. And I think, to me, it's the people that I love. And the people that I meet, I'm very privileged to meet a lot of people across the country who are working really hard to create and keep their communities safe. And, I strongly believe that the arts is the tool to do that. But really, it's desperate need that inspires me to keep going, but also a real trust in the fact that we are truly necessary for the change that is to occur. It's interesting, this year at the Earth Day, I think it was, there's a whole bunch of scientists who've been part of the IPCC report, etc. And really what they all come down to, in the face of what is an extraordinary future, is that what is going to be the most necessary thing is people. And again, it's that thing of relationship. If we frame ourselves with a sense of compassion and dignity and care and nurture, and an idea of hope, I think that creativity brings the capacity for hope. And if we lose hope, everything else will fall apart. So we need to be the instillers of the possibility of hope. And that's our task. And we have to do it. I don't think it's about a choice anymore. We have to do it.
Man.
You keep getting lost.
That was so good. I'll kind of go, I guess, a bit more on a selfish level, which is what keeps me going is, you can probably see, when it's my turn to answer something, I get just the adrenaline rush comes through my body, and it reminds me of all the reasons why we do this ridiculous thing called art, and I'm so lucky, and I guess allowing yourself a bit of that selfishness of being like, hey, I really, really love this. And then you can kind of break it down further and see like exactly what you guys are talking about. Like it's about being with the people you love and like sharing that with each other, and then hopefully letting that passion and love spread further, because it is contagious. And when it starts from yourself and it grows through your community, it just, yeah, it blossoms. It's awesome.
They were lovely answers. Is there another question? Yes, we have a question down the front here. And then let's start with the question at the back, and then we'll come to you.
G'day, my name's Scott. I was born on Wadawurrung country. I'm grateful to be on Gadigal country. I'm disappointed that we live in a country that still can't sort its shit out. I've been sitting on this for quite some time, and it's in relation to the boycott of Sydney Festival. I was in the festival, or my company had a show that was heart of the festival. We didn't boycott. We wanted to do something, but we'd invested so much of our money and so much of our time into making that show that if we did not do that show, we would lose our company. And I received emails and phone calls and bullying from people saying, if you don't boycott this festival, people will not come to your shows anymore. I even had one that said, the artists that have chosen to boycott the festival know that there's going to be another gig coming along. That was said by someone who definitely wasn't an artist. There was a person who was a lobbyist. And when I asked them, are you being paid to do this job? They said yes. And I said, but you're asking me to not do my job and not get paid. And I hear everything that you're saying, and I agree with you. We as artists need to be more compassionate, or we need to recognise each other, and we need to, the holistic idea of us being more united is, yes, but what can I do when I'm trying to survive and being victimised because of my choice, even though I am one of those people that believe so much in the reasons for boycotting the festival? I had to just stop listening to people. And I was going out there, I'm performing and doing shows for children. Do I go and tell children, sorry to disappoint you, I can't do this because other people tell me that and just one thing that I really want everyone to know, Sydney Dance sold out. The company that received the money that should have been boycotted, that shouldn't have happened, sold out. They made money. They didn't even offer to pay the $20,000 that it was back to the embassy. They just sat on their hands, enjoyed all publicity is good publicity, and yet the little artists that don't get funding from the government, anyway, I think you get what I'm trying to say, so I'm going to shut up.
Love it.
What do we do?
That is a very good question.
I agree. That's terrible, and your practice is your livelihood. Couldn't agree more. But at the same time, I think the boycott was justified, and support the artists who made those tough choices. But I'm not saying it isn't a tough choice. I'm not saying it isn't personally devastating.
I think it goes back to that sense of reciprocity and care, self-care, which we struggle with for all these reasons, Scott, and thank you for raising that in the room. But maybe it's about understanding and being more conscious in the way that we communicate these decisions that don't become divisive. Mm-hmm. Divisiveness is something that we're educated into as a political tool in Australia. So I think it's a big challenge across the board. And it's not really answering what you're saying, except to say, if a boycott has always been a boycott within parameters of capacity. So maybe it's just that we in the arts don't understand the rules of politics very well in order to frame it like that. It's not answering you again either, but yeah.
I think it might also go back to some of what we were discussing at the beginning, which is that there is no equitable framework and not really a consistent structure between industries or even for organizations and individual artists within the same industry. There is no structure and there is no one place to go and raise conflicting
that financial impact should never have been on you. That's the reality of it, is like you should be able to boycott these things and there be safety nets in place so that artists and businesses around those artists can do what's right and not look like they're about to lose their livelihood.
Yeah, and at the same time, I would just say that sometimes you do need agitation and you do need to stir the pot, because institutions don't change themselves naturally. They don't always change to meet the needs and ideals and values that society holds. And sometimes they have to be pushed to make those choices, and it's the institution that's responsible. Same thing happened in the 2014 Sydney Biennale over their links with Transfield, which was the company running offshore detention centres. They faced an artist boycott as well. They faced a whole bunch of protests, but it worked. They separate MCA and the Sydney Biennale separated themselves from the Transfield company, which was abusing the rights of refugees in Manus Island. That's a victory, you know. So sometimes institutions need to be pushed, unfortunately.
Totally.
We did have a question down the front here. And there is a mic on the way. After this question, are there any other questions in the audience? Yes, we have lots. Okay, so there's a gentleman in the middle, and then there is someone over here. Yeah. And then I think that's all we have time for.
So I'm not an artist. I'd say I'm just a consumer and probably a layman at that. But one thing that always strikes me is that, so next weekend I'll be in Tasmania for Dark Mofo, and I'm sure this is going to generate groans, but I personally think that's one of the best examples in Australia of arts festivals doing an amazing job highlighting artists. Whether or not you like their work is by the by. Do you think, and when I come back to Sydney, where I've lived more than a decade, I just think Sydney's so controlled, it's so polite, it's, you go to the Archibald with your wine and it's all terribly nice and upper class. Do we need something a bit more obscene, a bit more provocative? Do we need to give less fucks, basically, and just do something outrageous and be more willing to offend people? Sorry.
I was looking for the sign of it.
What is the sign?
I'm going to phrase that into a question, which is, for those of you on the stage, do you feel like there is a festival that lets you be outrageous or provocative, or are you contained or constrained?
Every day is outrageous, and if it's not, you don't get out of bed. I don't sit in festivals, but I think you have to be outrageous with your politics, and it's this kind of tension that we need to address, and maybe that's where we need to be more challenging.
It depends on what you think, how you define being offensive.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, or who you want to offend and why. I think those are the real questions, not can we or can't we be offensive, So I sometimes cop a lot of abuse online, and that's fine, because, art should be subversive, and if people don't like it, tough shit. But I wouldn't try to punch down and be offensive, in a way that I thought wasn't ethical.
I wonder about that question. I think Sydney's creating a tremendous amount of artwork across its multitude of communities. And I think probably any day of the week there's an ability to access something that is provocative and outrageous. I suspect that a lot of that work is coming out of communities that aren't getting the platforms that something like Dark Mofo is afforded. And the fact that festival, which has incredibly nefarious practices in the way it treats artists and arts workers. I don't think having outrageous work is justified if you treat people badly. And I would hope that there is a way of celebrating, you concentrate everything in on one week and it's really, really intense, and maybe it's amazing or maybe it's exhausting. But I think we do actually exist in an ecosystem that has those things happening every day. And there is really, really incredible artwork happening every day. And it's about seeking out local community that is making that work and supporting the folk in your backyard just as much as supporting the folk, in Tasmania or anywhere.
I have received the signal saying we are out of time. So we have come to the end of the questions.